turn this on and say welcome. We've had our opportunity for some healings, and if you didn't get a chance to get a healing and you want one during the talk, Chris is the healer tonight, so you can let him know. But I'm glad we're so far here. We don't know how many more people will join us. Welcome to our monthly Vespers and Message Circle, and we call it a gathering of spirit, where we do different things each time. And my topic tonight is communication with those who have crossed over. And so that's the topic, but later we'll do some meditation as well. And I was thinking that one thing we might do is to tell our stories about those that we know who've crossed over, whose presence we still sometimes feel, and how that's happened. And I wanted to start out with just a few personal stories, and maybe that will kind of jog your thinking. But the principles in this over 100-year-old church had a Christian base, recognizes multiple paths respectfully, and has a spiritualist tone, which basically means that we believe our souls continue. We do believe in angels and have for over 100 years. So the idea that our physical body is kind of like a piece of clothes that we may be wearing, but we do have much underneath those clothes, which is our etheric and energy spiritual body, so that if and when souls end a particular life experience, that body of light, that eternal self, continues. And love, apparently, in the readings of Edgar Casey and many other teachings, is the one thing that goes far beyond what we call the grave. So that through the force of love, souls can reach out and we can feel them. I once dreamed, when I was first studying metaphysics, coming out of my teens and having such a time of awakening, I had a dream one night that someone explained that if you think of the piano, there are the keys from C to middle C and C's to the next octave. And that also you could think of a radio with a dial, say 11 to 12 and 12 to 13. And that when souls transition from the physical plane, they're moving into the next octave on the piano or the next radio band. But when we meditate and when we pray or when we reach out with our force of love, we can transcend that band sometimes, and we move a little bit into the next band. And when we come together for a reflective and spiritual group time, we have the opportunity to do that. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about, even as others join us, to talk about some personal experiences, and then to open up a discussion about experiences. I mean, if you have a story to tell, and again, our topic is communicating with those who crossed over. And then later, we may meditate and do some intuitive work together and see if we can feel those presences and help one another. But we've started out with healing opportunities, putting names in the circle for healing, and having a chance to sit in a healing chair. So when I began to learn from my spiritual teacher, Jessica Madigan, about more about the reality of life after death, and to read her stories, it stimulated my thoughts. And when my teacher passed away, I didn't at first feel her for a while, but she loved Christmas. She didn't have children. She had kind of many children of the heart. She always loved Christmas, however. And when she grew up, she was an orphan adopted by a loving man who, at Christmas time, he would send trees to the blind school with big ornaments that people could feel who couldn't see. And she just remembered, so Christmas trees were really important to her. And she had passed in, I think it was the Jerrywood River, June, and months went by, and it was Christmas time, and I was supposed to go to the house of Reverend Tom and Mary Gary from our church. We were having a Christmas meditation, and I was going to do a sharing. And I had some ornaments and things on the mantle that had been there a good while in my house. So I went to take a bath. No one was in the house, and all of a sudden I heard this crash, like a boulder had come through the the glass window. And so I got dressed and with some trepidation came out to find that one of the trees had hurtled. It was like a decorative small tree, and it had hurtled from the mantle, as far as, say, to that screen. And I thought, gee, Jessica, you're letting me know that you are coming tonight. She spoke of times that close friends of hers passed away. Her friend Fran, I think, passed away unexpectedly. And when Fran appeared to her, she would notice that lights went on and off, and all of Jessica's pets would stop, especially the ones that their pets that have been close to Fran, and go to Fran's chair. So how do we communicate or sense that a soul is communicating with us? And the Bible talks about, to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to become like a little child. And children trust their experiences. They don't analyze when they're having it. Oh, I'm not sure this could be scientifically correct. They sort of trust from their heart. So when we have an intuitive experience, and the Bible has stories and stories about angels who appear and give guidance. I mean, there are many. Someone did research on how many times in our traditional Bible there are mentions of otherworldly experiences. Hundreds. I mean, many, many. And so how do we trust those experiences? I think when we have them, it's not the time to scientifically analyze them. I have worked with engineers, and they will say, and that was my late husband too, he would say, well, I was coming off the highway and I was driving at a 45-degree angle, and I think I noticed this, and he analyzed it. We had to kind of move away from the engineering analysis right when you're having the experience. It's sort of better to move with it, to sort of trust the experience, and use your critical powers later, as you can see if it fits with your values and feels right to you. But so that was one experience I had. But before that, my husband was quite a bit older than I, and his mother, when we met, was nearer to the end of her life. She had, when the Depression hit, she'd had to take Joe as a baby, leave her husband, and go back to family in New York. And due to the long separation, her husband found someone else, and so she worked in insurance and had a little baby with her in those days without childcare in Phoenix when she returned. And she found quite an identity in working in insurance, but later she was still working, I think, in her 80s, and her company was purchased, and they asked who the best employee they had was, and they said, Clara Haddock, she's wonderful. So she filled out the application, and when she was born in the 1800s, they didn't take her. And so she then lost that identity of working in insurance that had helped her through the loss of her husband and so forth. And she started doing recordings for the blind. But she developed cancer, and sometimes we think of cancer as, we think of the correlations to disease sometimes that occurs. It could be repressed resentment or hopelessness. Anyway, she did recordings for the blind, but she did develop cancer, and she was at the Hospital of the Good Samaritan, this is important to the story, in Los Angeles, and Joe, moved her up to Good Samaritan Hospital here, similar name. So I met her. She had followed Manly Hall, and she was a metaphysical aware person, and she went to her Church of Religious Science or what have you, and she, but a very private person who'd sort of buried the hurt of the loss of her relationship and being very businesslike, and at one point they couldn't do anything about it, and she was, didn't complain, but they took her across the way. I think it was Plumtree Convalescent. She certainly had good insurance, and unfortunately the cancer had gone to her liver, and the doctor was fearful that it could be a long haul with fluid building up and not a good outcome. And she was such a brave person. But having read Jessica's books, I thought, well, would it be like to try to talk to her about the possibility, as you were talking with your husband about, well, we all kind of move on from here and life is continuous. So one time she was sort of half asleep, and I started talking to her that way. And I could feel kind of a shift in the energy as you turn to higher power and you try to give subtle words of comfort to a person who might be reaching transition. When a mother gives birth to a baby, at the moment before the baby's born, she forgets all the training and she needs a guide to remind her there is something just beyond how you're feeling right at this moment. And so I think when people die, a guide, a comforter is helpful. So I had that opportunity to play that role, and Joe stayed with her, and they kind of reversed roles, and he was babying her. And in the night, someone called us, and the doctor said, well, that was a very fundamentalist. He said, that was a miracle. Jesus took her soon, and that was great. So she passed, and then 6 months later, I went to a branch of our spiritualist church, which was meeting at the Masonic Lodge in Santa Clara with Reverend Tom Gary's group. And we're in a collective group, and a woman who grew up in the Jewish faith, Reverend Carolyn Fabish, toward the end of the service, gave a spiritual message, as is our tradition. And she said, is there anyone who would like to have a message from a loved one? There were about 80 people, and I was in the back, and I raised my hand. And Joe wasn't there that day, and I said, I would like to have a message from Clara Haddocks. That's it. And so Carolyn walked up and down, and she held her brow, and she walked up and down, and she said, yes. She said, she went to the, I'm sorry, I'm leaving a part of the story out. Wait, I can't tell it yet. It's about the hospitals. Before she passed, when she was still at Good Samaritan, she told me she'd had a dream. And in the dream, she went to another hospital, third hospital, with big blocks of stone, and only professional people could come, kind of honoring her career. And that was near, and I thought, is this a metaphor for her experience of passing over? I'm sorry, now she's passed. Wrong story. And Carolyn said, she concentrated on Clara, and she said, yes, she said, she wants to tell you, she went to that other hospital, and she's feeling fine. Wow. That made me a believer, because that was her exact dream. There were the three similar hospitals. So that sort of started me thinking, this is for real. This is for real. A soul can survive. Another experience closer in my own family was
just throw in real quick.
Oh, yeah.
One of the teachers once told me that often masters and highly spiritual people pick cancer to take them to the other side because they can control the timing of it. It's a disease they can control.
Interesting. Never thought of it.
Well, that's what they said.
Well, then, when my brother in 2004, who was president of the Silicon Valley Tall Club, about 6'6", 15 quadruple shoe, big guy, was working around a school district, and he never talked a lot if he ever had a little health problem, and I thought he was in pretty good health. But he called one Sunday night, and it turned out it was my father's birthday. And my brother had not talked to my father in 8 years, as my father had remarried a person who was planned and did exclude his family from the family home, from his will, and my brother didn't think that was right. And my dad was an old-fashioned gentleman who could not stand up, though, to such things. And so they had been estranged, and we had called my brother David and said, David, you have to talk to Dad. He's turning 80, and please talk to him. So on what turned out to be the night of just before on his birthday, my brother called, kind of checking in, asking how my life was going, and I had people there, a small group. I couldn't talk long, but I felt that, and we got along well, but our parents had divorced, so we didn't talk every day, but he seemed to be checking in. And the next day or so, I got a call from that wife who wanted to know if I knew where my brother lived, and I did, and kind of got it out of her eventually that my brother had been found dead. And so I drove up to Redwood City with Joe, and my nephew, his son, was too young to identify the body. My dad was with this wife and went in briefly, but was taken home. And so I stayed with my brother's body, and it turned out that he had been exposed to meningitis, and so I didn't know how close I could be. I just the neighbor had some flowers. I'd go near but not right to him and say prayers and so forth. And finally, a very long station wagon like thing came to take his body. It needed to be long, and they carried him out and put him there and touched his foot. And as they were getting ready to drive him away, I heard him to the side of me say, "Am I going with them or am I going with you?" And I said, "I guess you may as well come with me."
That's right.
So I drove home and got up 85, and I was to have a class like this for women in my house, and the women were already there. And it was naturally, I was sort of in a state of disbelief. And I thought, and as I turned on to get on Union Avenue from 85, I heard him say, "I will always be with you." And I thought, David and I got along well, but again, our family, they've been divorced. It's not like we saw each other all the time. I thought, oh, that's what I want to hear. That's maybe not true. So I got in the class, and the class was done, and I said I did just said I had a loss in the family, and I may have said my brother, and that was it. And so at the end, we did our intuitive exchange of comforting messages, and Patty Hull England was there, and Patty held my hands, and she said, "I have a message from your brother." I said, "Well, what is it?" She said, "He said, I will always be with you." And these are the things that started to give me a lot of reassurance that the being, that person doesn't go. The Reverend, how would she ever know that Joe's mother had dreamed of going to another hospital? It's impossible. How would Patty know my brother had said that to me internally? The last time I heard him like that is when they went up to have the internment service. There's a big cemetery up by Skyline. I forgot the name of it. And
that's where I'm going.
And my mother was buried there, and that's where he intended to be buried. And there was difficulty with that wife, and so it was to be a private interment. My dad I brought, but it wasn't the wife and stuff. So it was supposed to be very small. Well, the whole Tall Club and the Citizens Band radio people came, and it was all over the hillside. But this man who, from Menlo Park Presbyterian, which we'd been raised in, but my brother wasn't participating any longer in it, and he had gotten wind of it, and he was going to do the memorial service, and he wanted to do the interment. I legally, as a minister here, I could do it, and I really wanted to do my brother's interment. So it was foggy, and Joe let me out of the car, and I was virtually running with my service book to make sure I had that opportunity. And I got to do it, but as we had been coming from the freeway toward into the cemetery, I heard him say, do I go in there, meaning the ground? And I said, well, just a part, that's like your old clothes. That's not all of you. So we did have the interment, and one of the CB radio guys put an antenna down in so my brother could communicate.
Very good.
They buried the CB antenna.
Yeah.
So
Why not?
I'm just telling these stories because I'm thinking that things like this may have happened to some of you here as well. And just other stories. Let's see that. Oh, when my husband died, there'd been so much. He was an old soul, and he knew metaphysics, and he was sort of trying to the end to stay because he wasn't my special daughter Vanessa's biological father, but he was a wonderful stepfather to her, and he knew what it would be like by me, just myself. And he was trying really hard to stay, and we'd gone down to Mexico. We found some good things, but before we could implement them, the VA, they wanted to try a really strong radiation, and that weakened him. And then he had a month and a half to live. So we did some of the high vitamin C therapy. He had no pain at all. I mean, parts of it were good, but he did about 4 days before he finally said, because sleeping on the bed, his back was turned, and he said, "I think I might be going soon." And he took the pets and turned them around and looked at them in his lap and looked at his beloved cats. And when he went in VA, we took Vanessa up, my special needs daughter, who doesn't read or write. But when she went into the hospital room, caretaker guy Carl, big guy, walked her in. And usually she's saying things like, "I want a treat, I want a treat," to measure it with her mental age. When she saw Joe there toward the end, she knew what was going on, and all of her disability left. She put her hand on his forehead like a grown-up woman, it was like she was present for a few minutes, and then it went back to being the child again, because her old soulness took over. But, and his passing was surrounded with I called the Catholic priest, and there was a Protestant minister for his kids, and one from our church. I mean, everybody was there. So his passing really was peaceful. But I was upset because knowing about this and even being taught now to be able to give a message after a while in our church, I couldn't feel him. I didn't know where he went. And I went over kind of disheveled over to Reverend Tom and Mary's house, and I said, I can't feel where Joe went. Is he gone? I just couldn't feel his presence. And Tom said, well, Jesus, when he died, there was a period of time, where souls go through a process. When Chris's father died at 92 at the VA in Southern California, the Baptist minister said, because I saw him in almost shadow form, and we went down to the morgue to kind of continue to say prayers the day after he died, and he said, I've worked here a long time. He said, death is a process, and it's a little different for different ones, and sometimes he remembered the 40 days. So Joe was in some kind of a process, and I couldn't feel him. He died on February 27th. That's why I'm doing this topic today. And it wasn't until our May church conference that we had, and we were over at Dottie Boone's bigger church and having it there. And there's a man from our church named Reverend Chris Lucas. And Chris Lucas had come down to the conference from the Mount Shasta area. Chris Lucas is known because he, many years ago, I think was picking up or taking a teenage child to a dance, and on the mountain roads there, a teenage boy who had been drinking hit him head on, and every bone and every organ was damaged, and so he was like tied up, probably suspended in the hospital room. If I have the story right, couldn't talk, he couldn't do anything, but inside he decided to work on forgiving this boy, and he worked so hard on it, he ended up healing. I mean, he healed, and they went out together giving talks about forgiveness. So Joe had died. It was months now. I had one dream of him coming down a stairway where he'd been sleeping, and one communication in a dream I had. But this was now, and it was a meaningful communication, but he'd been sleeping above, which I thought meant he's resting, healing. And now it was May, and I had my van, and I had Vanessa in the van. I was going to drive her home, and it was Joe's old van, and I went to Chris. I said he was getting ready to go back up north, and I said, I don't know if you know my husband Joe, that he knew him very well, but he died. And Chris took my arm, and he touched me with these deep eyes, and he'd come back like Lazarus from death, and he said, there is no death. And then I got in the van, and I'm driving up Highway 17, and I'm driving along. I look in the rearview mirror, and there in the broad light of day was Joe in the back.
Oh.
I saw him, and I saw him. I knew he was sort of floating, sitting, and he was looking out like an engineer where San Jose was, as if he was getting his bearings in a new world in an engineering sense. He was I knew he'd been floating kind of behind us for a while now, and that he was like you're assessing. You're in a new world and sort of assessing. And I mean, I saw him with my physical eyes. This wasn't an intuition. And he had beautiful pepper and salt hair that had become more salt in his later life. And I looked at Vanessa, and then, and then it was gone. And I was shocked. And I looked up one more time, and I saw the black was growing at the roots of his hair back in. And he had his sunglasses, like when I first met him, and he drove a leased Porsche and worked in electronics. And I saw him, and then he was gone. But I really did see him, because Chris Lucas's deep belief, it went through me, and it opened a door where I could see into the next octave. So that was a strong experience. One time when Chris and I started to hang out, and Chris is a Cancer with a very empathetic to emotions. He picks up a lot of stuff. And one of my writing students had given me a ticket to a string concert with musicians from Amsterdam or something. So we went to the concert, and it had been up late the night before, and I started to just kind of get groggy, kind of lean out toward Chris's shoulder, and there I could feel with that crystal energy of the beautiful strings, I felt Joe kind of above me, and inwardly he was telling me what it's like to be on the other side. And he said, when you want to communicate with someone, it's like you go to a gate and you shake the gate between this world and the next. Or he said it's like if you're a window with a curtain, it's like air that ruffles a curtain, or like being in a swimming pool when you push water at somebody, and but he was showing me he was learning it, but he didn't always know how it would come out. So after that, we got invited to an apartment of a lady in Los Gatos, and she had the string musicians there, but everything that night had to do coincidentally with Joe. Outside of her lovely place was parked a van, just like his old van, and then the musicians from Holland start talking about the place in Georgia where his army battalion had been. I mean, it was all night, and I realized that Joe was influencing the energy, but he didn't yet know how completely to control it. And recently I've been doing some intuitive counseling under my church license for a woman in Pescadero area, a lovely senior who had this beautiful piece of land they were going to sell, and it turned out that there was a chance, a remote chance, that the SPCA could get it and make it a big, huge animal preserve. And as the readings are happening, I realized Joe somehow has taken this on as a project, and she started to feel his presence. You know, in the end, it was successful. But my perception of him is sometimes that he's worked on things like when we had a drought and more rain, and he's working on things in the country. So from the people who have crossed over and my personal experiences, I've really learned a lot, more than anything in books. I've learned that it does, somehow we do go on, and we have a purpose when we're in that next dimension. We are doing things. So, I mean, of course, I'm not there. No one can know for sure sitting here, but there have been so many coincidental experiences. And I know some of you may have had other ones. Just see if there are any more that
I think you can know for sure.
you think you could know for sure.
I do. From those experiences.
Well, I do. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
so
there's just, yeah.
I mean, it's okay to say that nobody can, but honestly, you can.
You can.
I can, and you can. A lot of people can.
Sure, I know.
Probably every one of us here can. Yeah.
So I went to a network.
Is there anyone who doesn't mind if their story is on my recording for other students in our church? Okay. All right, go ahead.
I went to a networking group one day, and this gal came up to me and said, Joan, I might ask you something. I said, okay, ask. She said, I heard you talk to dead people. I said, well, yeah. What did you want to know? She said, you really talk to dead people? I said, well, yeah, I do that all the time. It's no big deal.
I'll tell you very quickly, when I was dating my wife, I had to explain to her that I did talk to people who had passed on, that this was part of what I do and in life. And she said, oh my gosh, she's a good Catholic girl. Oh my gosh, you talk to dead people? I said, well, they're not exactly dead, but they're people who aren't in their bodies. Oh my, she went home and asked her mother, she said, Mom, I'm dating this guy, and he's kind of weird, he talks to dead people.
Chris.
I said, what's so weird about that?
Chris.
I talk to my mother all the time. If I don't know what I'm doing, I lay in bed and she comes and stands at the foot of the bed and we talk it over. And she's been gone for years, so what's so strange about that? She said, I never knew my mother talked to dead people. So yeah, it's a bit of a shock.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So you talk to dead people?
Yeah, and her mother did too, but she never knew that until she mentioned to her about me. And then the mother said, well, yeah, my mother comes all the time, and she's been gone for years. And she talks to me on the side of the bed when I don't know what I'm supposed to do. She tells me. So she's still my mother. She's still helping me. And my wife was talking to her mother, who had her mother coming to stand by the bed, you see. So her mother was talking to dead people, but she never knew that.
Chris, do you ever talk to Mark?
Well, I've had feel like he's come through, but I'd rather talk to people that are physically dead than ones that are spiritually dead.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So, yeah, when my mom passed away, I was born on her birthday, and they were both cancers, and there's a lot of similarities and a closeness there. And when she passed away later that night, she came to me and took me out of the body and out through the universe, so I would, this is to show you that this is not all there is, and that there's so much more, and this is not the end of it, and that everything's going to be just fine. Everything is as it should be.
Yes, exactly right. We're created by a perfect being. We can't do anything imperfect. The only part that we can think of as being imperfect is the part that we're given freely to use, which is our imagination. That's for us to enjoy and play with. And that's the part that tells us we're doing something wrong. But it's not true.
Anybody else have a story like that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
When I met Carol, she had a cat by the name of Ollie Kahn.
Carol is his late wife.
I'm sorry? Carol is my
His-
wife.
yeah.
Anyway, the cat, the first time I went to her place, the cat jumped into my lap.
Ah.
And Carol says that cat never jumps into anybody's lap that comes in here to visit. As a matter of fact, he goes and hides. Well, I'm sitting there petting the cat. Later on, after we got married, but the cat used to love to sleep in the bed, and he'd put his head in my hand and sleep there. Well, Ollie Kahn comes and visits quite frequently now. I'll wake up and there's this furry head in my hand.
Interesting.
He still comes and visits.
He's not going away.
Well, one thing that's I've learned recently, and this meeting tonight fits into it, I'm half Sicilian. Most of the Greek interactions with pre-Plato, they ended up going to Sicily. Sicily is an eminent part of Greek, and then that influenced Christianity. Well, my grandmother came from Sicily, right around the mountain where all the Greek focus was. And she came and they told her power would double. She was a reader. And she brought the Sicilian mysteries. So when I was a little kid, she'd lay hands on my stomach. And I got used to, I didn't question God because I just go to my grandmother. And so she was, and then her daughter became the seer for our family. And when my mother died, we were all in a little room except my Aunt Mary, the seer. And we all held hands over my mother. And when I was praying with my cousin, and all of a sudden, there she goes. We're looking, and there was this a white haze that went up out of her head, and there was my father. She met him,
My goodness.
and I had nothing but total joy. I didn't feel any sorrow, any grief, because my mother met my father on the other side. And then about a year and a half later, I saw my mother on the other side. She looked younger, driving a car with a big scrape on it, because she always did that in real life. And there she was, happy as could be, driving that car. And I did have grief after that for a couple of days, and that's natural. So I just
That's natural.
cried a little bit, and after that, let go of it, and it was fine.
Anyone else with a story? Thank you. These are very pertinent. Anyone else have a story?
Oh, I've got some experiences, and to be honest, my intuitive scale, I'm in the negatives, and that might account for why, except for one experience, it's all been through extremely vivid dreams.
That's very important way is a dream.
And, tour with dear friends who passed, and my first experience basically in the dream, I didn't know he had passed until a couple years later, and it just built inside of me that I was so upset and not able to let it go. And I decided I had to go find out where he was buried and go visit him and come to closure. And I called the first cemetery in the book and said, is so-and-so here? And they go, oh, yes he is. And as a matter of fact, today's the anniversary of his passing. And because it was at the point where I was so upset, I was at my mother's house, I went to the bookshelf, pulled out the phone book, and looked it up and called right then and there. I was just like so stressed. And he came to me in a dream a couple nights later and told me, it's okay, let go. You know, it's not a bad thing that I'm gone. And I have another really somebody I'm very close to that passed, and when I miss him too much, I would say, show up. And I get a really wonderful dream, you know, so I like that. But my grandmother, I'm very, very close to, or I still am very close to her. And I knew the moment she died because the only time this has happened me in a physical sense. I went into my backyard and I opened the door and the roses were blooming and the aroma was overwhelming of the roses. And I go, oh, Grandma, I wish you could see these right now. And I felt her and I smelled her. And she had this smell of Tide and Downy and Jean Natte powder. It's this unique smell to her, and I smelled her. And I knew I could feel her, and I knew she passed. So my husband was driving to put our boat away into storage, I went running out the front door. You hurry up and come back, because my grandma's dying. I need to go up there. And so he took off to go really fast. And while he was gone, about 10 minutes later, my mother called me, and she said, Grandma passed. And I said, when? And it was the same time that I had felt her. So I knew it. To me, it's kind of like a cheat, because she gave me, like, knowledge, and I don't have to rely purely on faith. And so to me, it's like a cheat. And she comes to me in dreams sometimes, and she tells me when people are going to die. And one was my cousin, and they're very specifically different from the dreams I would have where she's a character in my dream. They're very vivid, and she always sits down on something, and she pats the seat next to her, which is what she always did. I mean, my whole life, to come sit next to her. So she pats the seat next to me. And one time she told me, your cousin's going to die. And I said, Grandma, what cousin? And she said Billy. But I was shocked. I go, there's nothing wrong with him. And she goes, I just want to let you know that your cousin is going to die, and it's okay. It's okay that he's going to die. He's okay. He'll be okay. I'm like, okay. So 3 days later, on July 4th, my cousin Joey was in an accident and passed away immediately. And Billy and Joey were like a couple days apart in birth, and my grandma mixed all of us up anyway. So I kind of, okay, I understand that, but I was really surprised because it was a car accident and totally unexpected, but she was right. And she visited me again when my aunt passed away, and again when my dad, also unexpected, and she told me, and this time instead of being like on a sofa or a picnic table, she was in the train station, and she said, I just want to let you know that I'm here, I'm going to help your dad. I said, Grandma, there's nothing wrong with Daddy. He's gotten better. He's getting out of the hospital. And she said, well, that's okay. He is getting better, but I'm just sitting here waiting for him. And I said, Grandma, he's getting better. He's not going to die. And she said, don't worry about it. And lo and behold, my dad died very unexpectedly a couple days later. So it was kind of comforting that I knew that Grandma was there every time. So whoever passed over, I knew she was there to help them. And I think to me, it's important that she was there so that when they transitioned, that they had someone whose own personality was very loving and always took care of people. So it makes a lot of sense.
I had a similar experience with my grandmother. I was working at ESL in Sunnyvale over here. I think it was 1976. I was on the whiteboard explaining a circuit to my office mate, Lynn, the Englishman. And as I'm up on the board, I feel my shirt tug 3 times. And Lynn's eyes are like this. I turned around and I walked over, picked up the phone, called my mother in Western Kansas. And I said, did Grandma just die? And she said, yes, how do you know? And I said, she just came by to say goodbye. I said, she tugged on my shirt, because every time I'd go by as a kid, she'd grab my shirt and tug it 3 times.
That's right.
And Lynn McCarthy got up and went out of the room. And what's even funnier is his brother is one of the mainstays in the English Psychic Society.
But he's not going to do any of
Nope.
that old stuff.
But that sure made a believer out of him, because he saw the shirt move.
Uh-huh.
It actually moved.
So Roger, have you had any experiences with loved ones after they passed?
Oh, yes.
Did you want to share anything?
Number one, I'm always curious, and when I have things coming up, I'm always saying, where did that come from, and why, and what is the meaning of it? And I was sitting at the opera on Sunday, Il Trovatore, which is composed by Verdi, and I was getting visions of things that surprised me. I had a vision of my mother, who died at least 15 years ago, with a big smile on her face. She was smiling at me, and I was just so. I have never had that experience before. I've been thinking about her, and having a lot of regrets. In fact, my whole life mentally has been one of a great deal of regrets for family experiences, that I didn't understand her when I was growing up, because now that I am older, I can understand some of the things, and she was a difficult person. And anyway, so I was really surprised that I saw her in this vision. It was such a, it was so brilliant. It was breathtaking for me.
Where were you again when you had the
I was sitting listening to this
Oh,
concert,
to the music again.
the opera.
Music.
And also I was getting all kinds of messages that were, number one, this opera was presented in 1563. I realized at that time how much fear people must have had about difficulty of living. And I got this message that something terrible has happened to me in my previous life, but I don't know what it is. And I was just, like I said, curious. And also I've had a daughter who died at the age of 4 weeks, and I have a sense that she's been with me, or around me all the time. But and some psychics have also talked about that too. So it's just a matter of curiosity. And I did not expect these experiences. I'm not looking for them; they just happen. And then I think, what's the meaning of that? Where did that come from?
When you look for them, they don't happen.
I was the opera was very powerful, and the music was just. I know the music very well. I know the scores, and it was not unfamiliar to me. But I kept on getting these pictures in my mind that were just stunning. It was so coincidental that I heard about this session tonight. I thought I need to go, and I'm missing another class at the church I attend. So I felt I had to come here, and I was told, and I did some dowsing, and I asked, what should I do? Should I come to this session? And the answer was, you come here.
You need to be here.
I need to be
We're
here.
glad. We're really glad.
Oh, could I say something to you?
Yes.
I think in the past life that you're talking about, that you envisioned,
Yeah.
I think you were badly mauled by some kind of an animal, perhaps a bull, and you suffered terribly and lingered, and had it was a disastrous life from this mauling by a large animal. That was very, very difficult, and you did not die immediately. And you caused your family had to take care of you, and you couldn't take care of yourself, and it was just a really hard life.
I accept that, what you told me.
We're talking about a lot of subjects that have to do with, come back to ways that someone who crossed over a soul could communicate. And Jan brought up a lot of dreams. And she said only dreams. Actually, my teacher Jessica said, such a dream doesn't lie, and she called it a superconscious dream. Freud and others talked about the getting in touch with the unconscious, But the superconscious dream is different. It's vivid. It's as if it really happened.
very.
And occasionally we even visit someone far away on this earth, may come to us. But that those dreams are dreams of comfort and importance. And so the dream is a very strong way in which a soul could communicate to you. Sometimes we just have a feeling that person's with us somehow, and often with us. But when I saw Joe in the car, I knew he had been kind of keeping near Vanessa and I because we were familiar to him. He was behind us, maybe always kind of floating behind us. One time after he died, we walked into Dottie Boone's church, and she said, "Oh, hi Lynn, hi Vanessa, and hi Joe," because so a psychic felt him around, and that he was assessing how to be in a new world. And so that was interesting. But the other thing is in teaching creative writing, where we have a cross sections of students who technically don't necessarily believe in these things, or going to I've gone to a support group since Joe passed and made a lot of friends in an ongoing community of people who lost a loved one. And the leader, Martha Weiner, who's attended our writing group, she attracts a cross section of people. But more and more and more now, people are saying things with very traditional backgrounds. One man whose daughter is a minister in a very traditional church said, "I know it sounds strange," he said, "but I often feel my wife is beside me. I mean, I sense her, I feel her." And it turns out that the majority of people, I think, in that group, straight cross-section of people and beliefs, have these experiences of someone who crossed over. So it seems to have a universal kind of a pattern. And that was, anyone else can we think of ways? One is dreams. One are these coincidental, maybe very unusual, like awaking a vision to music. We both had a music, the music put us into kind of a higher state. On that spectrum of the radio bands, we went up through the music to that higher frequency. So, and when we get together as a group, we often do exercises to encourage that, and we may tonight, to encourage it. We've had some evenings in the last year where we tried some techniques to see about allowing that angelic communication.
But we don't really need techniques, honestly.
Really, no, I guess not. It's just there. It's just really
there.
hot.
If we just admit it's there and recognize
That
it's
it's
there,
really happening.
it's there.
The opera that my son had given me gift tickets to the San Jose Opera Company, and the concert was the first opera that I went to for the season.
Oh.
And it was lovely, but I was amazed at the pictures that were coming to my mind, and just visions of things that I had not been thinking about.
So anything.
I should promote the fact that the light opera at San Jose City College on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there's a light opera playing there. In case anybody's interested,
Which one?
it's called I can't think of it at the moment because I'm half out of my body. I'll be back in a minute.
And you're also going to be in a performance.
Yeah, I'll be in it too. Yeah,
You're in it.
I
You and
just
your
turns
wife.
out my wife
It's
and I.
Sorcerers.
Sorcerer. Yep, that's it.
On San Jose
Sorcerer,
City
thank you.
College. There'll be
Oh, really?
a light opera, and he and his wife are in it.
I don't know if I mentioned the opera. It was Il Trovatore, which means the troubadour.
So do we see
Oh.
see some patterns, like my exposure to lovely classical music that I don't hear often also opened me up to the vibration of Joe on the other side. You were opened to your mother
Yeah.
through that. We've had common dream experiences. Have we any other ways that we've had experiences with a family member, like you both had the grandmother who opened that door to those other realms to you, and anybody else, and you had your mother. So,
Rose's mother, yeah.
and Chris had his mother, and you've had, and then you, John, have been around. You were around a lot of strong spiritualist practitioners.
I was born with memories of past lives, so it was kind of comfortable for me. I didn't have any problem with that. My father used to get upset with me because I would trap ministers with the Bible, even though I hadn't read the Bible. I would ask them questions till they got trapped, and they'd say, "That kid, don't bring that kid in here," because they couldn't answer the questions. And I just did that for fun. So my father told me I couldn't do that anymore.
And then,
The most vivid vision that I had of someone who passed over was when I saw a shiny penny in the parking lot at Safeway, And I said, oh, there's a myth that if you see a shiny penny, someone in heaven is thinking of you.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
what it is. I didn't know.
So I don't know why I don't know that I ever heard that myth before, but anyway, that came to my mind. So I reached down and picked up the penny, and there was a window like that, and my mother, in a dress that I remember when I was in grade school that she wore when she was in the PTA, and my dad and my grandmother right there, and my mother said, Joan, this is so good. I wish I'd come sooner, because she had COPD, and she had many opportunities to pass, but chose to stay, and then she'd have a miserable time of it, and have another opportunity to pass. And she told me one time, I'm scared to live and I'm scared to die. And I said, I don't understand that. Heaven is beautiful. You'll like it. So once I got that to her head, she went just in a matter of days.
Mm.
But she said, I wish I'd come sooner. It's so nice here.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. But it was so vivid. It was like you were talking about the colors were so clear.
Yeah.
This is like bright blue and bright red. And, you
Much
know,
better than the eye can't even see those colors. It's even beyond what our eye sees.
uh,
Who lives those colors? You can feel them through your back.
You know,
Yeah.
I find the pennies on the street several times every week, and I never have heard that before about.
Thank you for sharing that tonight. It's really
well, next time you find a penny.
I always say thank you, God.
Chinese penny,
No, an American penny.
American pennies.
I am taking a course on the Aeneid by Virgil, and it's a whole story of 3,000 years. And the sixth book, which I'm reading now, they go into the underworld, and he meets his father, just like Odysseus went in and he met Achilles and people there. What we've done in the Western world is we've broken off to our traditions of 3,000 years. The Romans, I think they cut some of it off, but before that, 2 to 3,000 years, going to the graveyard, going into temples, you would see your relatives. And here's the final point. What I'm realizing now, it goes back to Troy. And when Troy went down, I believe that was the end of an earlier phase where men and women were more equal. And I was telling him that. You go back into the Aegean, they have pictures now they found in the last 100 years. But what I feel is the Oracle of Troy, we're going to uncover that again. People who I know have tuned into it, things like flashes of light, big flashes of light, and like people are seeing a table with a square and beautiful purple and pink stars. And I've been tuning into that and realizing our history goes back to Troy. What's going to happen when the Western world gets back now going before Troy? And I think we're going to have an oracle in America. And one of my ideas on that, if you look at TV now, I mean in ordinary channels, what's on all the channels, are many of them, are the California psychics. They never used to let those people advertise. I talked to a lady in Lincoln, and we were telling her this, and she says, oh, we have that too on our TV. Oh, you have Nebraska psychics. She said, no, California psychics. But it's
I've
happening.
seen the commercial when I was up there. Yes.
It's interesting, and that wasn't so common. One of the things that we do see are programs about, there was John Edwards crossing over, and the
Oh, yeah.
Long Island medium, and the concept, and more popularized in more everyday terms for masses of people who have also perhaps had a personal experience, and so they reach out to these programs. I wanted to sort of shift gears into the topic of receiving a message from someone who crossed over. And I remember when Reverend Tom Gary said, I'd like you to come to our church and give a message. And I said, how in the world could I stand up in 1 minute and give a message? My teacher, Jessica, had given deeper intuitive sessions with training of the Edgar Casey method, and you spent a lot of time with the person and you looked at their birth date and various things, and then you went into a very deep meditative state, seeking higher powers guidance, and maybe could read the Akashic soul record. But how in the world could you just stand up without talking to anyone or knowing anything and just give a message? So it was a little scary to do, but it can be done, especially when a group is supportive. These are sharing intuition. When I talked to Edgar Casey's son when I was in graduate school, he said it was the intention of the people asking for the help and the people that surrounded the message that really allowed Edgar Casey to go to a more sacred place and to receive, you want to say, he felt that we can go directly to our Creator. But at times angels and loved ones on the other side came in. So if we were to try that tonight ourselves, I could try it, and then see if anyone else is interested in trying it. It takes a certain amount of trust in what's going to come, and the idea that we are being guided beyond ourselves. And so I might just go around the room. Is there anybody who would not want a message tonight? Okay. And again, what I say in the opportunities to give messages, it's come to me, is to say, anyone giving you a message is a human being. We're attempting to tune to a higher source. But if there's something later that doesn't fit for you, why don't accept that? Because the Casey reading said you're the best intuitive for yourself. That intuitive means the inner teacher. In traditional churches, you could call it the Holy Spirit. That's that connection. So I'm going to attempt to do that, but then open the door to someone else who might like to try it, right? So, or has experience in it. Okay, so to do a message, one thing to do is to ask everybody to kind of put your feet on the floor and open your hands, because if you're sitting like this, your aura is a little bit closed off. So we want to open up. And this time I'm not going to try. Oh yes, everyone has their own way of doing it, as we've been studying. Some people are intuitive through sound. So I like a person to at least say their name, and maybe the month and day they were born. Because for me, I reach out through sound. But somebody else may want to gaze at the person. If you are doing a message and you wear glasses, take them off, because you're not looking at their physical self. You're kind of looking at the aura, the energy that surrounds the person. The other day, I actually saw the aura of a little golden cat that I have at my house, and I could see her aura. Even animals have an aura. So, and if you're a feeling person, you can, if you're not able to touch the person's hand or something that they hold, you can send your energy across the room right into their space and kind of feel the aura and then come back. So I'm going to just ask each person just to say your first name and your month and day, but not your year. So I would say Lynn, September 11th. Okay, so I'm just going to go around the room. But first, we all want to tune into our higher power and to angelic guidance. So let's all take a deep breath and realize that we're asking as a group to receive the blessings of those on the other side in the heavenly realms, and particularly messages that might have to do with somebody who crossed over. Chris, may I come to you?
Yes.
Could you say your...
Christopher, July 10th.
I'm feeling Keith's energy system. Okay, say it again, please.
Christopher, July 10th.
Somebody on the other side wants to lift you up. They want to strengthen you and lift you up. They feel like you've been feeling just a little bit physically and emotionally kind of wobbly, kind of not as strong as other times. And there's someone there to strengthen you. And I do feel your father who passed, he's trying in his way to strengthen you and to encourage you to do some of the types of activities that you saw gave him energy. Not to the extreme, but and then there's a band of spiritual helpers. Some you knew, but many you never have met in this life are on the other side, and they're wanting to lift you up and buoy you up. And so you can ask them, what would help me to feel stronger, to stand strong, and to feel more comfortable, and they'll help you with that. John, may I come to you?
Sure, please. John Simmons, 12/15, December 15th.
It's funny because I think all of us almost need a lifting up right now. It feels like the earth vibration is such that some more than others, but we can ask our band to help kind of lift us up and renew us.
I feel like we are lifted up already.
And for you, the creative, even though you may not be in the theater a long time, it's actually been helpful, enlivening to you in lots of ways. And there's a big blue-green healing band coming through you. When you do creative things and you're around music and you're a very multi-talented person, you know, and so that's good. And you do lift others up in lots of ways, but every once in a while you need to be lifted up and to accept that there is that loving energy to
God
support
bless you.
to support you.
Thank you.
When did Reverend Pearl go into spirit?
Oh my gosh.
Long
my
time
wife
ago.
can tell you. I don't remember
Yeah.
dates.
Yeah.
A long, long time ago. She was 101, just 2 weeks short of 101.
There are some spiritualists, angelic guides in the spiritualist tradition who want to come through you sometimes because they could demonstrate through you.
Yes.
And they're asking if sometime you would allow them to demonstrate from you, maybe
Sure.
even here.
Bob Ferguson's here.
Bob Ferguson.
Yeah, he's here. Sometimes they do come in, and sometimes I will move over and let them speak through me. And I just kind of move over about halfway and let them come in, and then they talk, and then I learn, because I don't know.
Well, we might a little bit later ask if Bob has a message, and if you get a strong feeling, please interrupt what we're
I think
doing.
his message is keep doing what you're doing. He's happy with this. He likes
He and I
this.
spoke by phone, and I never physically met. We spoke many times by phone. So he's happy. Yeah, I know you're right in that. Okay. Michael, may I come to you?
Hey, Michael, August 3rd.
I see you putting together two bodies of knowledge that have been separated. And I know writing isn't your thing, but it could be dictating. It's some way that you're gaining this knowledge, and it needs to be recorded somehow. Could be just you learn, some computers will just take your dictation of your thoughts, because make a record of some of these discoveries in some form. And two bodies that were separated are now to come together. And that's what you're doing. And especially with the age of the feminine force, the divine feminine studies that have been not as prominent, coming back to balance the sacred masculine, and that's part of kind of what you're doing through recovering the oracles. But do make a record of what you're learning somewhere. Jerry, may I give you a message?
June 15th. May I ask you to speak a little bit louder?
Okay, I'll be just... Well, there's some changes and adjustments coming because you're going to be moving, and actually there'll be some adjustments with it, but all in all it'll be good. And it's actually to get you in a position where you can do a little bit more of your work again that you haven't had a chance to do, and you'll have a chance to work on some of your own projects again, which will be good. So that's coming in. Jan, may I come to you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can you say your name and month and day?
Jan, July 30th.
2 more times.
Jan, July 30th. Jan, July 30th.
Well, your mother has around her some beings and loved ones actually trying to help her go out, and she kind of had a strong physical hold on life. She was an earthly person in a way, but yet there are 2 or 3, and they're trying to gently pull strands, and they're saying you can help them by certain moments saying certain things to her that plant those positive seeds, even if you think it's not going in, it is. And maybe she's half asleep, or there's a moment where you feel like her soul self can hear you, and to go ahead and do that. The place she's in is kind of an earthly place too, keeping her going, but she needs once in a while to be around people that sense her spirit form, and if she were nearer, you might be able to do that. Have people come around that would help her gently draw her into other planes and away from this. And that could happen sooner or later. There's a variability, and they want to help you with that.
They're sewing her a new outfit, and I think she already knows that. There are 3 women there that are busy sewing and loving her. They're making something for her to wear when she comes over that she'll love.
Yeah, it's 2 or 3. It feels like the feminine guides trying to pull and draw her.
I
And
don't know
even
who they are.
even a blessing later from even a masculine minister-like person who would kind of bless, but who is higher-minded, who could give her a blessing and a suggestion. Because if she too, if she had the idea that it's right, she can use her stubborn earthliness to translate to help herself make that step. And that she can participate in it. She's not helpless because her soul self can help her do it. Joan, may I come to you?
Yes, Joan, March 24th.
You had some big steps that you took, and then you were kind of just reconfiguring yourself, and yet now you're kind of back on the track to move forward, and your husband is benefiting from the circles you draw him into, even if it's not evident. It's being soaked up. It's going to help him for later when he makes his transition. Your idea of merging the practical world with the spiritual world with some of your upcoming talks is really important, and I hope it's important for you to record or write some of your insights in many different ways, even if it's just a notebook full of them, but to not let your wisdom be only to a small group, but where it could be seen or read by others. That comes in from you. It's like there's almost like a golden horse or like a unicorn, like a sense of magic around you. And it's your sense of magic and play and that sparkly part of you that always renews you and regenerates you. And you have that around you. And your willingness to be the playful child and the magical child that you are. Roger, may I come to you?
Yes, please.
And if you uncross your hands and just say your name and month and day, please.
Roger, December 6th, which is St. Nicholas Day.
How was your thesis?
I'm still working
on it, because that's wanting to be coming in more this spring when you finish this course, to really go ahead and it doesn't, you might be being over perfectionistic about it, because concluding it, saying I'm going to give myself this time and I'm going to say this is it, and because it'll be good. It's a new step, but it's a little overdue to take that, and it will move you into 3 or 4 good opportunities that will come to you.
I know this is to be written.
And you can ask the group that you were part of in a past life that you're writing about, and you also lived in that spiritual group in a past life, and ask the guiding forces from the other side to help you to the completion, and then trust what you write. Trust the first impression that comes to you. The very first.
It's about the shakers.
Yes. You have some shaker spirit guides, and you can simply say, I'm going to let go now and guide me, and I'm going to take my next hunch to draw this to conclusion, and it will be good. And that feminine guide known to you, that was a very real experience, and that guide is trying to help you through some troubled waters as your son goes through things now and the things that worry you. But he's actually more than half, I can't explain it because his mother's still going through that's still happening, but he's over half of the learning he needed from it, and it's hard to say, but it'll be okay for both of them. The worst of the traumatic part is past, and he's learning what he's to learn, and it's better than it was. And Keith, may I come to you?
Certainly. Keith, August 10.
Well, Carol is just giving you a lot of warmth right now. She's sending red and orange, and if you can send warmth from the heavenly realms, it's very warm, and she's sending it all around you, and she's saying, it's like you are holding her hand, and you're also extending your hand to help Marge, and because they are sister souls as well as both connected to you, it's helping. She had a period of her own healing, but she's much more able to move now, and you sense that, and move in a guiding way. That's good for you. And we're not doctors, and this could just be me, but I get increasing your vitamin C and some aloe vera taken internally would be helpful to your lungs, to eat some of the raw aloe vera. Okay, well, I am now going to take a breath, release that, and ask if someone else would like to share some messages experienced in doing either Joan or John, and either of you want to try your hand at that? Joan, how about you?
Sure.
Good to you. And Joan will go with messages as she sees fit, stepping away from
So, the message that I have for the group comes from one of my guides, Ashtar, who asks you to sense the changes that are coming. Big changes are coming. There's changes in the way women are going to be more active in the future of the planet and in the political system, in ours as well as so many others. This is making people nervous. The powerful guys are nervous. So you see this nervousness of this emergence of the women. And recently there was a court case with Harvey Weinstein that came out, and he actually went to court and got sentenced. That's all part of this emergence of the power of women, the re-emergence of the power of women to come in and heal the planet, heal the souls, heal the communities, the families. And so that's one whole energy that's coming. The other energy that's coming is in the healing of the earth and the vibrational necessity to heal the earth so that the weather system supports and heals the earth, so that climate change emerges and is handled in such a way that we can actually see the healing of the earth in these next few years. So we're very lucky. He says, you are very lucky to be here in this time. You chose to be in this time to help with this process of the emergence of the female energy and the emergence of the healing of the earth, and to participate in that. On a regular basis, we, my spirit guides, we are speaking. We are asking you to participate in this healing of planet Earth, this emergence of the female energy through your thoughts, your words, your actions, your meditations. On a daily basis, you will be contributing to this overall healing as it moves forward. And I see clouds coming filled with rain, gentle, soft rain. I see plants sprouting from the desert. I see children running freely, healthy children running freely as we come into this more fuller spiritual awareness that's brought in through this healing, through the feminine energy, through the healing of planet Earth, and the overall spiritual energy that comes in and nurtures us all. Thank you so much for being here in this time, they're telling me. Thank you for being here, for volunteering for this mission to participate in the healing and this emergence of the female energy and the healing of planet Earth.
We thank you, guides, and we thank you, Joan. Beautiful message. Yeah.
Could I ask Joan if she would write my thesis for me? Because the Shakers was a women's movement, and the women were inventors, and all the things the Shakers were invented by women. And it was invented by women as well.
Really? Interesting.
So what you were saying resonated with me with a great deal.
You know, one of the computer ladies that sent John Glenn to the moon died,
Yeah.
just passed. She was 101.
Yes.
She did the orbital mathematics by
Yeah.
hand with the slide rule.
And he didn't trust anything but that.
Yeah.
Was that one of the
Interesting.
African American
Yeah.
Yes.
women mathematicians so featured in the movie Hidden Figures? It was
Yeah.
a beautiful movie.
Yeah.
I want to ask you too, we were seeing the Oracle of Troy, several people, but now I'm looking at, and it's a resolution what Lynn brought up, two forces coming in. I'm getting the Oracle of America. And my question is, for the Oracle of America, could it be a man or is it a woman?
Or is it a force, a collective force? Maybe.
Yeah,
Feels like we're.
it's not here yet, but it's, like what you were saying, there's a resolution. And you
John,
nailed
do
a
you-
lot of things I felt too, by the way. I felt right on with you.
Thank you. I missed some of that,
Thank
but it'll be here. John, do you have any messages to share or anything that's coming through? Okay.
One thing about men and women, of course, we're both men and women, aren't we? Honestly, I don't feel like I'm any more man than I am woman, actually. And I think if you stop and think about yourself, you'll probably find that's true too. Especially if you're more used to being out of your body than in your body. This is a great tool for this mean anything. So this feminine energy is always there, and it's been kind of quietly put aside and kind of forcefully put aside at times, and that's obviously ended. That's correcting itself now.
It's good.
It's time for it.
It's good. It's good. So anybody else who hasn't, when we were sharing messages, did you have a hunch or a feeling for yourself or someone else that you didn't say? Just something that came to mind that you wanted to say?
Well, I think I said it.
Oh, you did. Okay, for her. Okay, and
Women invented the rocking chair, by the way. Just
Which I really do like.
a lot of our inventions did actually come because of dreams. And when I was doing dream classes for the YWCA and drawing on my teacher's work and other sources, I found out that I know the sewing machine needle, I think it was Elias Howe, and he didn't know whether he should put the hole near the machine or down in the needle, and he dreamed what to do. And I guess Einstein was having difficulty with the theory of relativity. He dreamed of a snake that was biting its
That's
own
right.
tail that helped explain the theory to him. Julia Ward Howe wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic from a dream. She just simply dreamed it, woke up and wrote the composition. And President Abraham Lincoln dreamed that someone was lying in state in the White House sometime before his own passing. But President McKinley dreamed that I believe it was McKinley, he dreamed that his cat named Tom was trying to put his paw in the president's mouth and scratching on the roof of his mouth. And he was walking on the White House lawn, and he kept having the recurrent dream, and he just had the idea he should go to the White House physician. And the White House physician found a cancer he was able to cauterize in the roof of his mouth. And so many inventions, and that has come through dreams. Dreams, according to Jessica's work, Gateway to the Superconscious, dreams include the visit with loved ones who've crossed over, but they have a physical level. If you've been driving too far and you go to sleep and you just keep seeing the highway, or you're eating the wrong things, there's that very physical level of dreams. But one woman, Marcia Hunter, who I know led some psychic groups back in the 70s, she, blue-collar housewife, and she had been raised in a household with not a lot of consciousness to diet and foods, and so she was a bit overweight, and she really wanted to lose that weight, so she told her dream self that she would eat any food that appeared in her dream. So she started having dreams of hard-boiled eggs hanging from trees, and she did it. She lost a lot of weight easily by just adding the foods from the dreams.
Dream yourself thin.
Yeah, she dreamed herself. And then the emotional level of dreams has been written a lot about by various psychologists, with Jung from a more spiritual view. But basically that we have things that have occurred in our lives that we've repressed or pushed down. I remember dreaming a dream where I dreamed that I must have been a child, and I was in the back seat, and my mother was having my brother drive the car. He was a little boy, and I could see that she'd known him in a past life, so she was giving a lot of extra attention to him, like your adopted brother at that time. and it was in the underground part of a garage, which was probably my subconscious, that I had felt a little displaced during that time. It was something buried that I felt, that the dream dramatized, and that would be the emotional level of dreams. And then you get to the mental level, which is these inventions, and you could ask for a dream on how to resolve your thesis. You know, just ask for a dream, and that would be the mental level where we can actually solve a problem. If we don't dream it, we may wake up with the answer. So when you wake up and you're in between those two dimensions, instead of just jumping out of bed, take a moment to kind of stay in the same position and say, did I have a symbol? Maybe I just dreamed of a green tree. Then all day long, Jessica would have you free associate. What do I feel about green? What do I feel about tree? If we dream Mary was driving a red car up a steep road, that red car would mean different things to different ones of us. And it's how you feel about a red car. Was that a reward you worked hard to get? Did someone you know have an accident in a red car? Because dreams aren't just out of dream books. They're really, you design the dream. I was working trying to edit the work of a geologist the last couple of years, which finished, and he's very scientific. He had, his wife died, and he, older gentleman who worked where my father had worked or managed the survey, and he kept, he was having these dream meetings with his wife a lot, out of the body, so that he wanted to write about that. But he decided that everything he dreamed was super conscious and real. And it was hard to tell him that, you know, you could kind of be free associating. There's some symbols that might be messages for him, but his mind was made up. Every single thing he dreamed was an actuality. And those super conscious dreams where you visit a spiritual being, that's not every day. It is not every day. So, but the super conscious, she said, is that it has a very real feeling, and it is like a visit. It often brings us some insight, some help.
It's often very clear.
It could be very clear, and it could be very clear. Before, when I was pregnant with my daughter Vanessa, and, you know, and I do carry guilt that she has this disability. We were young and immature and made many, many mistakes. But I dreamed when I was pregnant that I'd been in Montana, and it was extremely cold winter. I had followed this Marcia Hunters group with my then very young husband Mike, and I didn't know, I met him at some metaphysical gathering, but I didn't know that he probably had Asperger's, and I did not know that. And I went up to Montana. It was a freezing winter. I became pregnant, and and then I had to fly back. I was very nauseated throughout the whole pregnancy, and they gave a drug they don't give here, and a lot of things, I guess you could say, went wrong. We were staying with another couple, and one night I had a dream when we returned to San Jose area. Mike wanted to work, but that tendency to Asperger's was interfering, so it was just hard times. And one night I had a dream that a man went into to a statue of the Mother Mary holding Christ crucified, and that he took a hammer and he chipped away the left side of the body of Christ. And I thought, what does that mean? Could something be wrong with my child? And and then the newspaper came 2 days later, and it said that a man had broken in the Vatican, and he had gone to the Pieta statue and chopped up the left side of the body of Christ with a hammer. But it really was an emblem of what Mary felt, that her child went through this, and you feel it every day. If I go in the morning and my child who can't stand up by herself but still can walk, is being placed for too many hours in front of disturbing TV. You know, you're always, a piece of you is, and you move her and try to change things. There's always that. So that dream was what Dr. Mark Thurston of the ARE Casey group would call an emblematic dream. One of these really archetypal dreams that mean lots of things to you, not just one thing. Because I was telepathically out of the body, knowing this man had done this. It was prophetic in my own life, but it probably still has meaning I don't know about. Because, and that's one of those super conscious dreams, right? That either you're dreaming, you're communicating with a loved one, or you're out of your body knowing world events. And I'm sure everyone here has had some kind of an emblematic dream that is not your everyday type of a dream.
You
So
were
those,
asking us several times if I got anything. I'm going to tell you what I got.
Okay.
I don't want to maybe say it, but it's there, and you asked about it. So I'm going to say it. You and Ven, or some name close to Ven, were two men who hunted together. and you went out together and did a lot of things together, and Ben got injured. I don't think you caused it, but Ben got injured somehow. I think he fell, and you got him back up, but he'd injured his legs and his back, and you said that you would take care of him, and he died.
Mm.
His last word you kept saying to him is, "I will take care of you. I will take care of you."
Mm. And it was in a mail vehicle.
I think it might be Vanessa, but I'm not sure, because it was Ben.
Ben,
something.
okay.
Yeah, was his name. He might have been Swedish, Nordic, possibly.
Huh. I wonder if it has to do with Chris. He's Swedish. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that life.
You're welcome. It just kept coming back, so I may as well tell you.
Did you have an impression, Chris?
Yes, I have an impression. It's just in general, the planet is, there's a whole lot of impressions that are incorrect, that are going to be, people are going to look back in a year or two from now and about all this stuff that's going on. It's all a big illusion. There's a lot of deceit, and that people should be forgiving of others that they currently believe to be wrong, and, you know, not so divisive. The heal, to look at the focus on everybody is part of the big one, and not so divided up into sections. There's a lot of division and deceit going on, and it's going to change. There's going to be salvation from that coming, and it may not be what people expect, but then it comes down to this resistance to change. And part of the resistance to change is going to be a lot of, you know, recognition of cognitive dissonance, that people's impressions of what is reality are going to change, whether it's on the energy world and how energy is produced, or whether it's how people are rallying around causes and thinking that anybody who's not in tune with that is less than ideal. So there is going to be a lot of healing coming on.
I hope that we do heal those divisions.
The healing.
Does anybody want to make a, like put in prayer intention? And we did talk about, does anybody need a message about somebody from the other side specifically? Something, you had some concerns? Did you, about people who crossed over, or do you feel like, is there any further questioning? No, okay. Okay, it might be a good time to just put in our circles some prayers beyond ourselves, you know, and we're living in the height of politics now, but not being, we don't need to be political to put out prayers. So
The darkest soil does make the most beautiful plants.
the what?
The darkest
Soil makes the most beautiful
does create
plants.
the most beautiful fertilizer.
Well,
Yeah.
So if we just wanted to just take a moment to put our collective united energy and the energy of the angels towards some concluding prayers, both for our nation, the planet, anyone in need, this is the time to put something in our circle of light.
I sense we should all put magic in our
Yeah,
prayers
thank you.
and
Good.
energy and resonance, and to help her balance her energetic field.
So for Keith's partner, magic to help her find balance in her in well-being.
And I'll put
Yes.
Earl asking
Yes.
for
Your husband, Earl.
my husband Earl asking for let's see, clarity and communication.
Clarity for Earl and Jan. Can you put the names in again of your mother and your cousin?
For my mom, Laverne,
Who has Alzheimer's.
my cousin Louise, who's having a lot of difficult times right now.
And for Colleen again, who has attended our group at times, who's having surgery on her right arm and wrist tomorrow at 12:30 at Kaiser, and just for lots of healing angels and a swift recovery for her. Anyone
For
else?
Jerry Stired, for housing, happiness, energy, completion of work, life's works.
Yeah, for you, Jerry, for
proper home.
for the right next situation for you, the right conditions for you to right living conditions, right opportunity to fulfill your purpose and what's important to you. And that divine right order will come into not only for you, but everyone associated with you. That we just take that whole matter and put it in the hands of the Creator. The divine right order will happen for you in this next month or two. As you change from one living place to another, may it bring good to you and everyone associated with you. In Christ's name, we put all these prayers. Anything else you want to put in the circle?
Yeah, ask for healing for Rose and her lungs and for everyone in the healing book. Every name in the healing book, let it glow and be healed. Let that person feel the healing.
I'm gonna put in for their feet, my cousin Marilyn and cousin Paula, and that their love will flow forth.
For my daughter Megan, who has been apart from our lives for a good while, for complete healing, for being the next sibling of a special sister. When her young parents had a lot of confusion, may all of that be healed for her. May she totally fulfill her own divine mission and path and reunite with loved ones when the time is right. Anyone else?
My son Adam, that he may have peace of mind and a career opportunity coming to him that he deserves and is warranted for.
Beautiful. For Adam. For each person here in these times of opportunity, but also much activity, responsibilities, anyone who needs physical healing here at this table, anyone who needs lifting up, may the wonderful angelic forces on the other side and the blessings of our Mother, Father, Creator, and the Christ light surround each person here and lift him or her up until we meet again. Blessed be. Blessed be.
I'd like to add Universal Church of the Master for activities for the upcoming conferences, for all the ministers and practitioners who are trying to bring the light and lift up the universe.
For divine guidance in terms of the board and each of our roles in it, whether to be on it or not at this time, just divine guidance surrounding our church, and may the white light of Christ surround each of our homes, our vehicles, our loved ones, and may the love of the divine surround us and protect us wherever we go, and may we be a channel of blessings to others. So be it. So be it. I'm glad we could gather tonight and we can hang out and visit a little bit, and some have to go, but I'm glad you made it here.
I'm so glad too.
I'm really glad you're here.
I was told to by my own spirit.
Yeah, we were just getting ready phase, but we had it's all good. So we're really glad to have you.
So the difficulties with that lifetime and the family pressure from that lifetime came into this lifetime.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So everyone's welcome to visit and share, and if you didn't get a chance to put a donation in the basket, we much appreciate it. It keeps our program going. It's there, and please make sure we have your phone number and email, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much,
Thanks for pulling us
John.
together.